Okay, I think we're getting ready to get started. Can we go live? That's what I'm asking. Are we live yet, guys?
We are live.
All right, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Quality and Life Committee to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Present.
Presente.
Here. Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to approve of the agenda. Anything from staff? Anything from the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
We need a roll call on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, and now I'd like you to consider the approval of the consent calendar. I know some items have been pulled. Staff to read those items.
Madam Chair. Item F, request for approval of a grant agreement with the New Mexico Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the purchase of emergency preparedness equipment, specialized training, and contracted support for the Office of Emergency Management and the Santa Fe Police Department in the total amount of $283,975 through September 30th, 2026. Brian Williams, Emergency Management Director. Also in their request for approval of a budget amendment resolution in the amount of $283,975 in awarded federal funds to the Office of Emergency Management. All three. Item G, request for approval of amendment number 2, item number 23-548, exclusive negotiation agreement with Santa Fe Arts Institute to extend the term through April 30th, 2025, to negotiate terms for land and building disposition and development of the Midtown Visual Arts Center pursuant to the city's request for proposals. Daniel Hernandez, Metropolitan Development Agency Director. And item J, consideration of Bill 2024-19, adoption of ordinance number 2024, Mayor Ellen Weber, a bill providing the sale of city-owned buildings, improvements, and 6 parcels located at 1600 St. Michael's Drive within the city and county of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Aspect QOZB LLC, in 3 phases for a total of $5 million. Daniel Hernandez, Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency Director.
Anything else from staff? Anything from the committee? Could I get a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, now we'll move to presentations. Marcella, can you read the presentation, please?
Yes, ma'am. Presentation, Human Services Committee Strategic Action Plan Update 2025 through 2029. Krista Hernandez, Youth and Family Services Program Manager, and Therese Hunter Schnell, Human Services Committee Chair, and Julie Sanchez, Community Services Director. I'm sorry, Youth and Family Division Director.
IT, could we get screens, please?
Thank you, Marcella. I like that promotion. That was great. Good evening, committee members. My name is Julie Sanchez. I'm the Youth and Family Services Division Director. And it is my pleasure to introduce Krista Hernandez, who's been a program manager here in the division for the last 3 years. She is responsible for managing the Human Services Committee and the Children and Youth Commission, with a budget at this point of close to $3 million, in which is given to our community through different grant opportunities. And so she'll be presenting this evening on the Human Services Committee Strategic Plan, which will be driving the next round of funding for adults ages 18 and over. And so with that, I'll go ahead and surrender the mic to Krista.
Thank you so much. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here to be able to share these updates with you all committee members. So we're going to start off by covering the role of the Human Services Committee. They were formed by governing body resolution in 1987 and have 5 primary functions. The first of which is to fund essential human services. These consist of primary healthcare, access to basic material goods and services like food, shelter, mental health, counseling, and related crisis services. They also provide, maintain, assess, and advocate for human service needs, coordinate resources, evaluate local human service programs, and provide technical assistance to programs. They receive 2% of state gross receipts tax dollars in order to fund these services. And they review and make funding and policy recommendations based on the identified priorities within each of their strategic action plans. The funding goes primarily towards safety net services and navigation services to the tune of about 1.1 million. They also fund pilot programs and emerging trends to the tune of about 100,000. And so the current membership consists of our chair, who I'm excited to be presenting with, Chris Hunter Schnell, our vice chair, Michael N. Pepper, members Karen Baldwin, Kathleen Ortega Courtney, Emily Houses, Jennifer Romero, Kathleen Tooney, and I serve as the staff liaison as Julie Minchin. 4 of these members are new to the committee, and they've added a great amount of expertise based on their experience with their work. We're grateful to have these members take on these roles and make these funding recommendations and identify these priorities on behalf of the committee. And with that, I will turn it over to our chair, Tress Hunter Schnell. Thank you so much.
Is your mic on?
Get a little closer.
I don't know how I did that. I'm out of practice, guys. At any rate, we adopted the results-based accountability planning framework. And as you see on this slide, we are guided by our vision and mission. And I believe you have copies of the presentation before you. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about this planning framework to help you understand the process that the committee uses and that our grantees use to design and implement their programs. The first thing we do is say, how are we doing as a city? And we also look at data, both qualitative and quantitative. And the data available to us comes from a variety of places. We look at both state level data, US data, and then we try to obtain county level data. And that helps us to describe what the key issues are for our city. The next question we ask is, what is the story behind these data? And we refer to the data trend lines as turning the curve. So for example, if suicide rates are going up, that curve is going up. So what we want to do is design programs who are addressing these issues that is going to turn the curve in the appropriate way. So in terms of the example, we would be turning the curve down to reduce the rate of suicide among adults in Santa Fe. The next question we ask is, who are our partners? Obviously, the committee partners with our capable folks at the city, but we also look to our community-based nonprofit organizations in applying for funding and then applying that funding toward improving health and social determinants in the city. And we are this next round of funding asking our partners, the community-based organizations, to be more deliberate in the way that they engage their partners to turn the curve in the right direction with those indicators that they have identified that they want to work on. The next step is to identify what works to make improvements in health and well-being. So these are strategies that are either evidence-based or promising practices or have shown to make improvements on health status in specific arenas. Those strategies then contribute to our action plan, which then the organizations that we're working with establish performance measures. And that's where the accountability comes in, that we are looking to support our organizations to develop performance measures that can answer these three questions. How much did we do? How well did we do? And is anyone better off because of what we've done? So those are often referred to as outcomes. We refer to them as results. After all of our organizations go through their cycle of funding, which we are looking to 4-year cycle this year, this next round, we then hope to attain our end result in mind, which is equitable access for the people of Santa Fe to a happy, healthy, safe, and thriving life. So that's a big goal, and we hope to attain it. Next. So okay. This slide is represents the expected results by priority area and indicator. So as I mentioned, what we do is gather all the data with the help of Aspen Solutions, who was our consultant for data. So Natalie Skogerbo and Anna Coughlin are our allies in assisting us not only to gather data to help define where the priority areas are, but also to use to determine how well we're doing. So we have 4 priority areas. The first is improve adult health. This is huge. It's a very large category, but we have trimmed it down in terms of expected results to identify 4 key areas that we're hoping to see improvements. And as you see, these areas have a lot to do with chronic disease. It's the main cause of death in the state and in the county. And so we look at improving and reducing risk factors, for those chronic diseases, improving diabetes prevention and control. And we added this time round for the strategic plan, improving maternal health and reducing risk factors for falls among adults ages 65 and older. So you will see corresponding priority indicators, and those are generally percentages compared to the state and compared to national data. And so those correspond to our expected results. The next area is improved behavioral health. And I think most of you are very well aware that our behavioral health system is very challenged. We have a shortage in providers, which has been well documented. We're looking to reduce risk factors for what we call deaths of despair. This is suicide, overdose, deaths, substance-related injury, and we have corresponding indicators for those results that we're looking to improve. And they are, of course, the percentage of adults with frequent mental distress, suicide deaths, alcohol-related deaths, and drug overdose deaths. This is, of course, not something that we can do with the amount of funding that we have in any kind of major ways, but what we see is that we participate in a collective action with other funding sources and organizations that are also working toward improving health in these areas. Next slide, please. The next priority area is improving community safety. And here we have identified reducing domestic violence, gun-related violence, and improving pedestrian safety. Now, that involves all of our trails where there's a lot of activity going on, where bikes are running into people, and then we are also very concerned about crosswalk observance, both by pedestrians and by motorists. So we have added that one. That's a new result that we're looking at. And they have corresponding indicators. And once again, we're looking at our county data to be able to measure how well we're doing. The final area is strengthening equitable society. This is also a major arena for our expected results. And it covers affordable housing, inclusive of emergency and transitional housing. I know this is on your plates quite often, and we appreciate any opportunity that the governing body has to improve affordable housing. We also are looking at improving access to many key quality of life issues, parenting support, access to nutritional food, transportation, improving on literacy, looking at workforce development, and also legal support for vulnerable populations. And we fund organizations to provide safety net services as well as navigation services. And I believe that you are well aware that our navigators use the Connect to be able to make referrals for resources. And we are so delighted that the city and county are working in partnership to be able to utilize this network to increase the amount of services that our vulnerable populations in particular are receiving. So how are we doing? Well, of course, this was my hardest part of prepping for this presentation because there are so many wonderful stories coming out of our contractors. There are 18 funded organizations with our funding, which is approximately 1.2 million for our main fund. And of those, there are 13 organizations that are providing the navigation services. So I just want to tell you about a couple of stories. and give you a sense of the kind of accomplishments and success stories that are coming out of our organizations. So there's a really wonderful partnership that has been happening over this past funding cycle, and that is the Coming Home Connection, Kitchen Angels, Christus St. Vincent Hospital, and Nurses with Heart are working together to create a new program called Home from the Hospital. And this is when our senior or elder individuals who have been hospitalized and have no support from family or friends or neighbors. So this collaborative effort will provide low-income older adults who are discharged from the hospital with transportation home. Then they provide 3 frozen meals and a follow-up call from a health navigator to make sure that they are continuing to receive the services that they need. And I thought that was pretty nifty. The next thing that I wanted to share with you is that the Food Depot, as you know, has done amazing work throughout COVID, through that whole period of time, the pandemic, more people were homebound. And so they actually receive about $80,000 from us annually. And they had a recent situation where they had a 43-year-old individual who lived in a trailer with no utilities and is unemployed, suffers mental health challenges. And so they realized they needed to do something outside the box. So they actually delivered an emergency food box to this individual and helped the client address their food needs. And they continue to expand their services where the unmet needs present themselves. So they have provided diapers, baby food, and they also deliver books. And all of that is based on unresolved needs. I could go on, but I know you have a very long agenda. Let's see, next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of some of the numbers. It's sort of how much we do. And within those numbers, there lies how well we've done and some pretty significant outcomes. But overall, you see 2 fiscal years worth of data about services that have been provided. So Safety Net, we have over 52,000 contacts that were made. Now, a lot of that data comes from the Food Depot, which they have seen an exponential increase in the amount of services that they provide. And the same is for the following year, 1,500 contacts around Safety Net services. The navigation services, as you see, are over 1,000 for fiscal year 23 and over 1,200 for fiscal year 24. So I mentioned the kind of data that we collect, qualitative, quantitative, and this is another set of data that we really love to receive from our navigators. And the navigators are the ones who are in the trenches, and they are constantly interfacing with our clients that are served by our funds. So last September, there was a meeting where they provided a lot of input about insights, observations that they are making among the population that they serve. And they continue to see these emerging and unmet needs, which are actually very chronic. And it has to do with housing and homelessness, transportation. These are all items that I know that you hear about often from your constituents, and they continue to be presented in these navigation opportunities to reflect the kinds of needs that are currently being requested and met through the navigation services that are offered. but they also have needs themselves. The navigators have identified the kinds of supports that they need. We're looking this time round at evaluating our reimbursement rates for navigation services, and we're hoping to increase that to be more in alignment with our county partners. And then also improved conditions. They were very clear that they could really benefit from having the opportunity to award cash assistance and more food resources. And of course, as we know in our city, suffering from a great deal of substance misuse. Finally, wanted to bring a set of recommendations from our committee. We continue to encourage collaboration with other funding sources, both foundations or state, local, and federal funding. We also want to continue to support our community-based organizations that we're partnering with to remove the barriers to accessing services. Also, we're looking at, as I mentioned previously, increasing the contract term from 3 years to 4 years. We really believe that that would afford the grantees an opportunity to more successfully accomplish their program results and, accomplish their performance measures and be able to report back to us that they actually are experiencing their clients being better off. Finally, I would humbly ask for consideration from all of you and the governing body to consider increasing our budget through either gross receipts tax benefits or any other way. We anticipate seeing a rough period of time ahead with changing in social and political environments and continuing to see many unmet needs. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Madam Chair, I've completed my part.
Thank you. Those very informative, well presented. Go to committee now. We'll start with Counselor Alma Castro.
Thank you. No worries. That one's always a little bit tough. We have a lot of CAs on the council. I want to thank you so much for the presentation. I have worked with the Food Depot and I'm very impressed with the work that they've done. Sorry, we're having some mic issues. I applaud your request for more funding, and if we could get that sort of in writing, in particular to the Finance Committee, as we're looking at next year's budget, we will probably have unanticipated GRT. And so please request one-time funding if at all possible for programs that you're running. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Councilor Castro, thank you very much.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to follow up with Councilor Castro's comments in regards to the request for funding. I'm always happy to allocate additional funding, especially for programs that support human service initiatives in the city. In addition to requesting or putting that in writing to the Finance Committee, I would say put it into all of the City Council. But more importantly, I would ask that the committee send it to the mayor because that will help Julie as she goes up. The way the budgeting process works is staff tells their management how much they want in the budget. Management then works with leadership, including the mayor. The mayor creates the budget, then it comes to us. By the time it gets to us, unfortunately, the way the process is working right now, it's very hard to change the budget. I'm hopeful that changes in the future. But for example, say you wanted $2 million and we weren't able to give it to you. To give you the $2 million we wanted to give you, we'd have to pull it from somewhere else. So it's easier to get it in the mayor's budget than once it comes to council, because then we have to cut it from somewhere else. So that's recommendation one. Recommendation two, following up with Councilor Castro's comments around the one-time funding use. And those are not for expenses that will be reoccurring. So can't give grant money out that is going to be reoccurring for in perpetuity, but you could give a grant out for 1 year. And so I think look at those initiatives where it would be one spurt of resources put out in the community. From my estimation, it's not if there is going to be unanticipated GRT, there absolutely is. It's let's get those resources in front of all of us. That way we're aware, because what ultimately, unfortunately, has happened is we as the council have not had an opportunity to have a say in that matter. We've been in the reactive mode, again, similar to the budget. So any way you can get any information in front of us with the financial figure, it helps us to advocate and lobby the executive to say, we want to see X, Y, and Z amount of resources for X, Y, and Z program. If that's, in the general budget, we would like to see X, Y, and Z amount of resources for one-time funding for such initiative. That way it's helpful for us, because once it's already proposed in front of us, again, it's that we've got to pick and choose. And I don't like to be in that predicament where we have to figure out what we're going to cut to allocate y'all resources. So sooner the better to get us info. And one thing to also say is look towards the future, where if it's not going to be with the unanticipated GRT one-time funding allocations, that I don't know when usually we do it now in December. I don't think that's happening. But for future allocations, whether it's the general budget that we go through in April, or if we look at any other allocations of resources that might be coming our way. Always good for us to have a good idea of, we need X amount of resources for mental health support services. We need X, Y, and Z amount of resources for getting housing for folks. And that way it's coming from your committee, it's coming from the public, it's been vetted by your team, and that helps to give extra push and getting it actually allocated. So just some kind of, I guess, my 2 cents, so to speak. So, but thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the work that you and the committee are doing. And if there's anything I can do to be of support to your committee, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you. And thank you, Julie and team. And good to see y'all.
A couple of questions. So it's been said that crime is down in Santa Fe based on the dispatch statistics. And have you, in any of the things that you're working on, have you seen that have you seen an increase in victims that is kind of counterintuitive to what the statistics from the dispatch?
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair. So right now, the Human Services Committee, as far as I was looking at their report on grantees, right now, there's not a nonprofit agency that's directly targeting the population that you're talking about. So we don't have exact numbers on how many folks are victims of crime or anything like that, unfortunately.
Okay, the other question I have is, are you working with any organizations that work with the young people? Because I think what you're doing is fantastic and much needed, and it's only going to get worse, is what how I sense things are going to go. If I think we have to do both lifts, like we need to take care of the population that's at need, but try to stop generational trauma and try to get to a place where we can kind of put a stopgap in. And I don't think we can do that if we're siloed. So I feel like organizations working together to kind of like at least communicate with each other about what's happening in each of their, wheelhouses would be helpful. And then I'd just like to concur with my colleagues that I do think get the council and the mayor and the city manager everything you need as far as the budget goes, because we see the budget when it's already completed. And it's very difficult for us to change it.
So Madam Chair, on your first question, Krista also manages the Children and Youth Commission. And so Human Services Committee funding is really focused on adults 18 and over, and that's per their ordinance. The Children and Youth Commission focuses on youth ages 0 to 21. Thank you. It's been a while. And so they do have some overlapping priorities so that there is this seamless transition from a young person into adulthood. And there's also a focus on families. But unfortunately, this funding pot is really focused on adults because it's based on an ordinance. To your other question around funding recommendations, we did put in a request for the one-time funding. And that's actually for flexible funding for constituents in the community who have one-time needs. So when I think about, and of course, Krista can give really good examples because she's working in the trenches with the nonprofits. But for example, folks who need new tires because, you know, their transmission, maybe they need new shoes for a job site. Like that flexible funding allows people to get ahead and not fall behind. And so we did put in an allocation. I got the magic call. I don't know if he's still here from Randy Randall, who said, "Do you want more?" And I said, "Absolutely. Give it to us. We'll spend it." So hopefully when that request comes to you, we'll be able to get that funding out to the community before the holidays because we also know how tough it is right now. So yeah, so thank you.
Great, great. Well, you guys are doing incredible work and I support you, obviously. Anything else from the committee?
Just thank you.
Okay. Marcella, can you take that to the next order of business?
The next order of business is the pulled item F. Brian Williams.
So I think we'll start with presentations, then move on to questions. Does that work for the committee?
Well, so these are just pulled off of consent. I did pull this item off of consent. So if you don't mind, Chair, I'm going to go ahead and ask Director Williams some of my questions.
That'll be faster, yes.
Perfect.
All right. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Just in recognition of his schedule, I want to let Sergeant Wood present any questions that you have because he has to get out of here in 5 minutes.
Sure, no worries. And I will be very quick, Sergeant. My biggest concern with taking any funding from Homeland Security is what our responsibility is, in particular with enforcing immigration law. And so I did get some additional information from DC Valdez that we do have a policy in the city of Santa Fe. And I just want to confirm with you that we do not enforce federal immigration law and don't plan to use any of our equipment and or funding to enforce federal immigration law.
Chair, Councilor Castro, that is absolutely right. We do have that policy in place, policy 76.1, taken from the guidelines of City of Santa Fe Resolution 99-6. And it states that we will not, City of Santa Fe resources will not be spent to assist Immigration Customs Enforcement on the sole purposes to identify and locate citizens or individuals based upon their citizenship status.
Perfect. And in receiving these funds, that doesn't compromise that position in any way, correct?
And I've been working with this grant that we've been using for several years now. And to my knowledge, there is no written language and guidelines in that grant that stipulates that we must assist the federal government in accepting that money.
No further questions. Thank you.
Garcia?
Questions, Madam Chair?
I just want to echo Councilor Castro's comments. And I'm glad to hear that this will not put us in a position where we will be under the scrutiny of the federal government in this way. And that's our immigrant families will be as safe as we can make them moving forward. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Can we get a roll call?
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Faulkner,
Yes.
motion passes.
Right. Marcella, can you get us to the next order of business?
Madam Chair, next item of business is item G, request for approval of amendment number 2 to item number 23-0548. exclusive negotiation agreement with Santa Fe Arts Institute to extend the term through April 30th, 2025, to negotiate terms for land and building disposition and development of the Midtown Visual Arts Center pursuant to the city's request for proposals. Daniel Hernandez.
Present. If I may, I'd like to request an opportunity to present. Ray Landy is here this evening representing the developer Mata, and they have a small presentation to put together, but I did want to introduce what we are requesting. So there is an existing exclusive negotiation agreement between the city and SFAI. Since then, SFAI has created a separate organization to serve as the developer of the Visual Arts Center at Midtown. And we are at the end of that exclusive negotiation period. And I'm glad to say that they've actually completed all of the deliverables that are in the exclusive negotiation agreement. And in your packet, I included all of the items that we had anticipated and expected from them. They've been completed except for one small tranche, which is related to infrastructure. And we anticipate working on that at the beginning of the following year. Wilson Engineering Firm is on board with the public facilities. They're beginning the design work, and that will help inform that section of the exclusive negotiation agreement. So we're asking for an extension really to commence the process of inserting terms into a disposition and development agreement between the city and Mata. And we anticipate that it will take about 4 months to do that. We'll circulate the DDA at the beginning of next year in January. And we anticipate going back and forth negotiating terms to bring it back to the governing body and through the committee process, hopefully in the spring next year. But for now, so again, it's just requesting an extension of that agreement. But I wanted to give the Mata Group an opportunity to present their project and all of the work that they've done over the course of the past year. So I'll turn it over to Ray.
So we'll do the presentation first, keep it fast, and then we'll go to committee.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, I'm Ray Landy. I'm a trustee with Santa Fe Art Institute. I'm also the chair of the Midtown Committee for the Board of Trustees, and I'm also the co-chair for the Capital Campaign. Just to remind you why we're doing this project, this building, the Visual Arts Center, is set empty almost 7 years, and we're right next door. And we want to make a difference, and that one way to make a difference is to help a number of nonprofits in Santa Fe co-locate and find synergies to serve a much broader community in Santa Fe. So that being the mission, let me tell you what we've done so far in the project. And Jamie Blosser is actually traveling for another board meeting. And but Jamie will become the executive director of Mata on January 1. And we just finished the last interviews with the finalists for the new executive director of the Santa Fe Art Institute. So this will allow Jamie to work full-time on Mata.
And I hate to interrupt. Will you just explain a little bit of the difference between the Art Institute and Mata and their relationship?
Yeah, Santa Fe Art Institute is a residency program for artists, about 50 artists per year. And we created a separate LLC, which is wholly owned by Santa Fe Art Institute to manage Mata.
So there's a relationship, but they are separate entities.
Separate entities. But as you'll see, there's going to be a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's okay, Ken.
Everybody knows the location of where we're located on Midtown. We won't go through the maps, but our development team consists of Serafina Company, which is our capital campaign consultant, Mass Design, which is a well-known architecture engineering firm here in Santa Fe. Grow America, which is our development consultants from New York. They manage a portfolio that's almost $3 billion worth of public-private partnerships here in the U.S. And Microgrid Systems Laboratory and HomeWise. And HomeWise is helping us in a number of ways in terms of loans and other financial tools to assist the development. So the work that we've completed to date
Can,
through all the buildings.
can we hold on for 1 second? Is this presentation up for the public?
It's on the
Okay.
Thanks. Sure. Perfect. If you go through slide 2, just to go back, you'll see at the lower part of the Midtown campus is Aspect Studios, and we're up at the far upper corner to the left with the existing SFAI far left. Next slide. And that's where SFAI is located, and the Visual Arts Center and the auditorium and the Tishman and Thaw Center, those all form one compound, Visual Arts Center. And you can see right here the boundaries of the site that we're working with. SFAI is in the far right. 3 barracks, which would be left, remaining World War II barracks. A lot of historic relevance to a number of veterans in Santa Fe is the top 3 buildings. To the left of Santa Fe Art Institute and Visual Arts Center is the rest of the site. This again is our development team. Next. And these are our partners. We have letters of interest from each one of these partners. Make Santa Fe Creative Startups Center, Little Globe Youth Works, Santa Fe Indigenous Center, Mass Design, Burns Vital Spaces, UNM, and Girls Inc. Some of these are changing as we talk. Girls Inc. is looking for a separate. We'd like to have spaces here because young women can actually partake of the teen programs that make Santa Fe artist studios. They can take advantage of new media that's being taught. So all of that is embedded with education within each one of these. And each one of these partners will have some form as part of their mission. The real mission here is to find synergies between each one of these organizations. They now operate solely independently. They need to find out how do we make our financial plans next year. And in this way, we hope that we can create some economies of scale, some synergies that really 1 + 1 = 3. And we can help service them in many ways they might not be able to with the kinds of things you have to auditors, tax audits, the kinds of things that a lot of nonprofits just don't know how to do as well as maybe some experts. And we would hope to spread that across many of these nonprofits. Next. And as you know, we were very involved in the community engagement for several years with the UNM program. So 4 or 5 of our community engagement as well. Next. And a lot of this is, we're trying to make so many of these nonprofits accessible to all ages, community, arts, and cultural programming. Next. And a key part of this is cultural heritage. In fact, in phase 1, 3 of the primary partners are Indigenous led, Little Globe, Mass Design, and obviously the Santa Fe Vision Center. Next. As I mentioned, education training is key to each one of these organizations, and that hopefully will give people access to education they may never have had the opportunity to take advantage of. YouthWorks and food service here. YouthWorks will be exposed to other things in the center that they might not have ever been aware of. Next. So this is what we've done to date, and as Daniel indicated, we did all of our ENA checklist. We've gone through all the due diligence, each one of the buildings, and the preliminary design, concept design that Mass Design has done. So each one of these have been completed, operating in governance. So they're all involved in the governance program, and we've completed our cost and our capital campaign strategy and our schedule. I'll look at that a little bit. Next. What did we find out? Well, we found out that the Visual Arts Center seemed to be. So immediately upon accepting the finding of the RFP and accepted by the city council, we became aware that we have to replace the entire HVAC system and all the plumbing in the Visual Arts Center. And this is about a $4 to $5 million cost that we did not anticipate. We also, some of the tax increments were no longer available to take advantage of. It's part of the gentrification of Santa Fe, Midtown, and this particular census tract no longer meets that requirement in terms of median income. So that's another $5 million hit that we didn't anticipate. So we've had to raise the bar in terms of our fundraising, obviously. But the board of SFAI has confidence that we can do that. They voted to proceed, and that's what we're doing with both the Visual Arts Center. Very, incidentally, the very worst part, and sometimes that's look like, but this part was actually in pretty good shape from a structural standpoint, foundation standpoint. We have that little problem with asbestos and lead paint. We do have to fire sprinkle this because that's where the Make Santa Fe group will locate their operation. Next. The proposed space uses, you see the 3 barracks. In the blue is Make Santa Fe. The purple is Girls Inc. Out to the right, those represent each one of the other tenant partners that would locate there. We haven't assigned space. We have letters of interest for each one of them, and that'll be our next phase to negotiate who's next room and how much they actually pay. Next. Let me go back if I could just real quickly. This is a building, a compound that has 60% leasable space. Commercial uses for an office building or some other kind of commercial use. So it's a perfect way to use this building, the city owned, in a way that I think would be extremely valuable and beneficial. Next. There are some circulation issues that we're working on now, and we'll start to work on that with Wilson in terms of these right-of-ways of the streets, emergency access, loading, et cetera. We hope to have that resolved fairly quickly. Next. Open space is a key part of what we're working on. as opposed to having these buildings sit individually. It's how do we locate them together to create community spaces, and solve some of the side at the same time. Next. Estimated operating costs by phase and total projects. Right now, we're seeing sliding scale for all of our tenants. We've committed to meet them where they are. So whatever they pay now, that's what we hope they will pay when they move in. So the partners will pay for operating costs and the debts only. And you can see what some of these estimated operating costs phase and total project are through phase one, phase two, phase. And I can go into any detail like next. We've identified all the economic benefits. We're going to certainly have that specified more as we go into the negotiations for the DDA. But as you can see, we're hoping to create a lot of jobs. We're hoping to educate a lot of kids, and we're hoping to have significantly benefit with environmental, some environmental progress in terms of how we're handling these buildings. High performance, all electric services, meeting a LEED AP requirement. And we also have enumerated some equity benefits and cultural benefits in your package as well. Next. Preliminary construction cost. So when we look at the total cost here, around $7 million for phase one, and it increases. Phase three is more expensive because that's makes Santa Fe, and we have to do a lot of upgrade, removing asbestos, lead paint, putting in fire protection systems. So we're looking at something that was much larger than we anticipated when we first bid on the RFP. But what we've heard from our donors and from others is that this is a really unique project to the city. This is about community benefits. This is not an extension on a museum. It's not another building at the opera. It's something that's going to really benefit so many people in the city of Santa Fe. And that's what we're building this strategic campaign on. Next. So the phasing program, dark blue is phase one. That's the existing Marion Center. And the darker blue is the Tishman and Thaw Center. And then the lightest blue is are the barracks. When those will occur is all function of capital campaign and where the money is going to come from. What we'd like to move as fast as possible. Some of these nonprofits are trying to decide where we're going to be in 2 or 3 years. And so the faster we can get this done, the better. Obviously, next. So sources of funds. Because I can't read it. Right now, we have raised around $1.5 million private donors. We have a $2.5 million commitment, which is a matching 2-to-1. We have another $1 billion. We have a bridge loan, and we anticipate receiving total around $4 million from the greenhouse gas reduction program over the entire phases, the entire 3 phases. This is all part of the Biden's Infrastructure Act. We know that money's left the Treasury. We're part of a consortium that has been given billions of dollars. So they have our letter of intent and how we'd like to do that in terms of our high performance electric, solar, and LEED certified building. We anticipate about 150,000 from the state. We're going to start walking those halls soon. We've met with a number of the assembly members of the assembly, four who have will be hand walking us around. They've been very supportive. We're going to ask for 1.5 million. We coordinate that with the city. through Daniel. They've asked us to ask for more, but this year will be a request of 150,000. And we have some others, other sources of income as well, from foundations and other institutions in subsequent phases. Next. So our fundraising feasibility, I indicated what the funding commitments are to date. Again, I indicated that this is about community, and that's what funders are reacting to. At the same time, they will reiterate to us, and 35 have indicated that they need to see investment from the city in Midtown. They want to be sure this project is going ahead. There's sometimes, because of what's happened in the past, some trepidation. So the more they see from the city, more they're likely to give. And that's a really important aspect of our fundraising. So we've raised almost 100% of phase one. But we're going to have to raise some more because some of these funds are giving over a 2 or 3 year period. Next. This is our schedule, and which we have for phase one and phase two and phase three. You can see the years, but we would like in 2026 to have phase one up and running and operational. And depending on the funding and our fundraising and other sources of funds, those would be subsequent phase two and phase three would follow year by year. Any questions?
Presentation, we started with Councilor Castro first last time, so let's go to Councilor Garcia.
No questions, just comments. Good luck. My ears perked when you said that you were going to be chasing after some of the Biden infrastructure dollars. Just a heads up, we do have a new administration coming in that likes to tear apart the previous administration's work. And so I don't know how much of that will be available come 2025. My hope is that it would be there, but that's left up to the incoming Trump administration to make that determination. So just want to make sure that you're well aware of that, because that is a hefty sum of funds that you would be looking to support this project with.
It's just your expectations. So really, I'm some real.
Okay. But again, just more so commentary. So but all the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Thank you so much for the presentation. A lot of my questions were answered, so thank you so much. Aggressive timeline, 2028, you want to be done with the project of close to $20 million. How feasible is that? We know that we're extending this because there is a little bit of infrastructure that still needs to be done. How do we meet those goals, and how confident are you that you're going to meet those deadlines?
It will depend on our lead donors over the next 6 months to a year. We had 3 or 4 more lead donors, $5 million range. I think we would be doing really well. Again, it's going to depend on that environment, how people are feeling about the future. I'm hoping that many of the citizens of wealth in Santa Fe, because of what's happening politically, will gather the wagons around so many organizations in Santa Fe to really fund them, because they realize what's going to happen in the future is really going to affect so many nonprofits, especially in arts and culture. We also hope that some foundations will come forth in ways that they say they might, but they are going to wait to see what's going to happen in a year or two for the same reasons. So it is aggressive. The sooner we can get it done, because of the escalation in construction cost, the less the project cost. And that's what we're really driving on. And once we open phase one, that's what will pull more donors in, as they can come to the facility, they can see people working, they can see what the benefits are. So I think that will escalate up.
Awesome. And that's one of the reasons I was so excited and important that you speak into the mic, because there are folks that can watch these YouTube videos and folks in our community that are really invested. I would also look to your partners and your neighbors. I see Girls Inc., I see YouthWorks on this list, and we have Aspect Studios who's going to move in right next door and could really be a great partner. So
Yeah.
thank you for your work, and let's continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just Godspeed, anything I can do to help. I know I definitely support this initiative. That being said, can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Faulkner.
Yes.
Thank you
Sure.
very much.
Can you take us to the next order of business, Marcella?
Next order of business, item J, consideration of Bill 2024-19, adoption of ordinance number 2024. Mayor Ellen Weber, a bill approving the sale of city-owned buildings, improvements, and six parcels located at 1600 St. Michael's Drive within the city and county of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Aspect QOZB LLC in 3 phases for a total of $5 million. Daniel Hernandez, Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency Director.
I'd like to do the presentation on this first, and we can hold questions because I know there's going to probably be new information.
It is broadening some information that was given to you before at the request of Councilor Garcia and Castro to highlight some of the aspects of the community benefits package. I put a presentation together, and I also sent to you all the presentation and some other documents. Also, Bill Jesue, the developer, is in on the East Coast. Unfortunately, sadly, his dad is very ill, and so the family is gathered together on the East Coast. And so, but he is available on Zoom if he's able to. Is there? Right. I can start, and he can, and when you bring him in, Q&A. Okay. Should I wait? Because Garcia was the one who asked for a lot of this information.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
can,
wanna-
we can wait for Counselor Garcia. And maybe that'll give staff a chance to go get somebody on Zoom.
And just want to make a quick clarifying comment.
Yes.
That the developer, Bill, did come out at my request to the open house at Consuelo's Place, who is going to be one of their neighbors. And we had a lengthy conversation about how they could be a good partner and a good neighbor to some of the folks moving in. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, he texted me that he was going to go, and then he called me on Monday and wanted to debrief and said he really enjoyed the tour and actually wants to continue involvement in housing strategy and homelessness at Midtown. So I think he knows a lot of the same people I do in that world. So it was funny.
We have Counselor Garcia back on deck. Let's get to the presentation.
So the main structure of the transaction for the disposition of the Garson Studios and the surrounding land, the 3 buildings, which are Benildes, Driscoll, and Garson Studios, is really related to the way that the community development plan was structured. It is a triple bottom line approach to cost considerations and accounting. And that is in the introduction to the community development plan that says that all transactions and all development at Midtown will be using the triple bottom line accounting approach. So I'll start there. And next slide. And so for those who aren't familiar with the triple bottom line approach, it actually works to monetize, list and then monetize items beyond just the economics, the cash dollar of a transaction. So they look at the triple bottom line as people, planet, profit. And in the community development plan, we use that same framework. People we called social, planet, we did environment, Profit, we did economic, and place was one that we all agreed to. As you saw earlier, was a group of community organizations that I worked closely with in creating the community that really informed the community development plan. We felt that there was another piece of triple bottom line to create quadruple bottom line, which was culture, that was really unique to Santa Fe, that maybe these other pieces of the triple bottom line didn't use. So there's actually four things that we looked at in wanting to itemize and quantify in this triple bottom line accounting approach. So next slide. So this is a very full slide, and I was trying to figure out, should I break it down? Should I leave it full? I left it full because, again, it's on Civic Clerk public website, so it's accessible. But what it does is it actually breaks down each of the triple bottom line elements, or in this case, the quadruple bottom line. It itemized these, and then it, on the far left side, it actually says where in the DDA, the Disposition Development Agreement, these are located, and the requirements and obligation the developers has to perform according to these different pieces. In one of our previous discussions, the last discussion that we had together, there was a question about the developer's obligation and performance to fulfill these. And there was a request for a default and remedies and termination clause summary, which has been written. You should be receiving it within the next couple of days. It was written by the city attorney's office. It was sent earlier today, so it's been circulated to the governing body. But I'll leave it to you if you want me to itemize or go through this list. I'm happy to do that. Or if you have specific questions about them, we can do it that way as well. Which would you?
It's the desire of the committee.
I mean, I would like to go through some of these because I do have some concerns because this is a lot different than what was initially presented to us, just even in the overall number of the community benefit, because it was 7.1 the first version. Now it's jumped up to 10.1. There's items in here like housing affordability, 2 million. That's required. That's not a part of, that's a non-negotiable. So I think that's where, if we want to go one by one, I think let's do that because.
So in Article 11.7, there is up to, a minimum of 2,000 square feet that will be set aside. And so there was evaluation put on that, meaning that that can never be used other than for education spaces. There's an existing agreement between the developer, the Santa Fe Community College, and Stagecoach to provide educational programming within that space. So we know that that's offline for anything that the developer can do and use it for other purposes, meaning that when a production company comes in, that's not, he can't rent that space out to a production facility for pre or post-production work. So we quantified that. The internships, there will be internships, and again, just the mentoring and the sort of process of providing the internships and stipends and everything that goes along with that, we quantified that. There's a commitment for 20 internships per year, and everyone agreed, and we worked again with the film office on just sort of identifying what seems feasible, what seems reasonable for implementation. The payment in lieu of taxes, that was something that we negotiated, which was new and unique in that it's a city-owned property, meaning that we don't currently pay property taxes on that piece of property. But we said, well, it'll stay in public hands as long as the lease is in place. And that means that the city won't be charging taxes on that because it's still city-owned, publicly owned. We said that during the lease period, since all this activity is happening on it, that we would create a payment in lieu of taxes, work similarly to payment of taxes, and we quantified that as well. Again, that's something that he wouldn't otherwise have had to pay. The housing affordability is what, as you know, the inclusionary program, the Santa Fe Homes program, it has the inclusionary requirements, is always up for discussion and debate. So when we first approached this project, One, we were excited about seeing a residential element because it added to the total housing units that was previously estimated to be developed at Midtown. This added to that total. That was one that was actually a bonus for us, but we also said that he could not use the payment in lieu of building the units on site, that he would be required to build those units on site. So when that happens in any project that comes to you, there's always the discussion about whether the developer is going to pay it in lieu or whether they're going to build it on site. The developer's analysis is based on a cap rate. It's based on what they would have potentially gotten if those units were at market. So that differential is taken and then a cap rate is put on it. And that's what they ultimately could have sold the property for at a future time. And then that amount is actually what the developer considers. That's why when your developer comes to you and they're saying, I can't afford it, I'd rather pay the payment in lieu, that's actually what they're evaluating in the background. So we did that calculation with him, and that's what that $2 million represents. The screen, we in the DDA under Article 11.6, there is a requirement that he work with arts and culture organizations in Santa Fe to do at least 4 fairly large events, like weekend events or week-long events, that would occupy and they'd be able to use the screen for those large events. So the idea behind that was whether it's a arts and culture organization, whether it's a LGBTQ organization that wants to show related films, whether it's an environmental group, whatever it is, that they have an opportunity to actually have a series and a festival around those events. Programming is also available to community organizations 8 times out of the year, meaning that an opportunity to have a Spanish-speaking film festival or whatever, but there would be an opportunity for community organizations to identify films that they would like to see shown at the screen. Otherwise, the screen also is open to the public because there were conversations early on about the screen just actually being a screen for the production studios that would need it. So part of it was saying that there was a lot of discussion about people wanting to go back to the screen and have it as an operating facility open to the public. So those renovations costs related to that are there as well. The cafe restaurant, those are the costs of the renovations to do that. Again, we monetize that as well because we really wanted to see that as part of the overall development. Again, he could have chosen, which we pushed not to just have a food facility the way that a lot of production companies, if you've been to LA or other places, actually here, they have those big food trucks and they have those tables and you kind of just walk by and like, I wish. But the idea here was to actually open it up to the public so that public was interacting with with production crews and talent on site. The outdoor sculpture he's just doing, it's part of the community development plan. He's committed to relocating 3 of the sculptures that are at Midtown. You've probably seen them. There's sculptures scattered around. We want to make sure that they find homes at Midtown in public places. So there's a lot of open space on his property, and so he'll be relocating those as well. The PNM electric infrastructure is a huge cost to him. He is increasing the level of electric supply that will be going into Midtown, and specifically to increase the production capacity of the film production studios. And that's a huge heavy lift. And the costs continue to increase beyond the 1.5 million that you see there, but we stopped negotiating those terms. Yeah, so they stayed there. The requirement in the community development plan is to decommission the entire Midtown site from gas. Everyone will be switching over to electric. So there's 3 existing buildings that are on gas systems, and we've given him over a 7-year period to decommission the buildings. Again, that's a heavy lift because of the equipment that will need to be removed, gas lines that will be to be capped, and new electric systems going into those buildings. Solar energy installation. It is right now in the community development plan, there's a requirement for a certain percentage of energy to be either provided through solar panels or purchasing of alternative energy. He is installing, and as you heard earlier, the MATA team is also installing solar panels in the buildings. EV charging stations is also part of, it wasn't a requirement, but it is one of the the leadership in energy and environmental design credits that is in the community development plan, the installation of EV charging stations. He is complying with all of the requirements that are in community development plan for the LEED program, as well as the best practices stormwater management, which is very significant because there's a lot of flooding that goes on at Midtown, especially down to the southwest. We've heard from neighbors during the planning process that their properties get flooded. And so there's a huge effort to make sure that we're trying to capture at least 90% of stormwater on site so that it's not flooding off site. And that's a best practice established by the EPA. And so it's now one of our best practices in the Midtown plan. So that's how it's all calculated. You see the amounts there at 10.1.
Madam Chair, can we ask questions just on this portion of the presentation?
It's finished.
Sure. Yeah.
Way back.
I was deferring to Councilor.
Yeah, can we just?
Sure.
Oh, we're done.
Yeah, I just have a few more slides that kind of go into what I anticipate the next questions to be. So next slide. There are some below the line, and again, I didn't put them above the line, meaning cost actually that will be coming to the city through these community benefits. But there are ones that are in the DDA that he is obligated and committed to. So, for example, he is required that between years 1 and 5 that there will be a total of $30 million expenditures happening as a result of the production on the site. If he fails to meet that, there is a calculation in the DDA that matches what we sort of calculated as what GRT, the city, would have received based on that projected expenditure. So it's up to $3 million that he is at risk if he does not meet these benchmarks. So again, it's between year 1 through 5, he's obligated to spend 30 million, and through years 5 through 15, it's 150 million. Also, the total, so this really deals with more about the appraisal issue. We have estimates for just general renovations of the building, not necessarily improving them, but renovations of the building to make them commercially viable, if you will, at about 7.2. But in our DDA, we have him obligated at least to spend $5 million. We know it'll be more than that. But he's obligated to spend at least $5 million. And that's fairly unique in DDAs. Usually they're just obligated based on a scope of work. And he's obligated to complete that scope of work. There is an obligation for him to at least spend that $5 million. We know that the cost will be more than that. Next slide. This goes to the above line stuff, meaning the actual cash transaction. Not all of this is cash. Someone is paying for all these community benefits. The actual issue that seems to have sort of polarized people is around an $11.4 million appraisal that the city commissioned in late 2023, early 2024. And it was used to serve as a starting point for negotiations with the developer. It's customary for cities or entities, agencies to do that, to procure some commission an appraisal so that at least they have a starting point. What are we talking about? Are we starting at $1 million or are we starting at $100 million? And it gives them that starting point to negotiate. Typically, the developer does the same. So the developer commissioned one as well. Theirs came in at 4.8. So you see this huge difference. And the question then raises, well, why the huge difference? You will be receiving within the next day a very clear summary of the differences in the two appraisals. There was an attempt to try to reconcile those two appraisals by my predecessor. She commissioned a review of the two appraisals. It was not a formal appraisal. It was a review of two appraisals, and they came in at yet a different number at 16.6. So you see that appraisers, there is a methodology. There's they do comparisons. They do some data about cap rates that I discussed earlier based on income that the site can generate. But ultimately, it is a professional judgment, a perspective, an opinion that gets settled into an appraisal. Ours came in 11.4, and the purchase price that he will be paying in cash over a period of the 3 phases of development is a total of $5 million. Plus, he has lease payments per year at $30,000 over a 10-year lease period, which equals $300. If that lease period is shortened because he finishes the project in 5 and wants to purchase it in 5, the obligation of the $300,000 is still it's still part of the obligation, so that lease payment stays in place. So the calculation that we have proposed here is that 5.3, which is the purchase price offer, and the 300,000 is 5.3 million, and plus the 10.135 gets us to a $15 million transaction, which is about $4 million over our 11.4 appraised price. And again, these are dollars. These aren't just sort of made up numbers. These are dollars that the developer is paying into the project. So the project is, and so the real transaction to be considered is actually about a $15.4 million transaction that we're agreeing that is in front of you. Next slide. Actually, this is the slide that summarizes. It's bigger. Sorry, I should have had that. It went up. But it summarizes the amounts. There was a question also from Councillor Castro about the housing affordability piece. So I'll highlight that a little bit more. So, and again, in the negotiations, we negotiated that he would be required to comply with the Santa Fe Homes program. And that program is about inclusionary housing. Santa Fe Inclusionary Housing Program requires that at least 50, or provides for, a developer can choose to pay the in-lieu fee, but he is in this project required to build 15% of the units will be affordable. The inclusionary program is really a program almost across the country, really targeting workforce housing, meaning, and I'll show a slide later, but it's really targeting families between 80 to 100% of area median income. Those are the families that just can't quite meet the market because it's too high, and they often don't qualify for low income housing, and they're frequently left in the shade, like not having access to the resources. So inclusionary housing is a great program to try to target that population in our communities. So the question has been raised. Oh, so then the other comment related to that is that he's meeting the requirement. 15% of the units will be affordable, but in the Midtown plan, there is a commitment that we will build 30% of all housing units developed in Midtown will be affordable. So the question is how do you do that if each project is only 15%? The way we are achieving that is each project that we build at Midtown, we will negotiate a 15% inclusionary housing program. And we also are dedicating 4 parcels at Midtown for 100% affordable housing. So we've calculated that through those 2 strategies, we will be able to achieve 30% of the housing units at Midtown to be affordable. If we find that, we're in year 3, 4, 5, and we're getting behind our 30%, then we have our options. And the bottom point I make is that we're in total control of each parcel disposition. So we can either negotiate 15%, we can negotiate 20%, we can decide that we dedicate another parcel for 100% affordable housing. So we'll always have that flexibility and opportunity to achieve that 30% over time. And there's no, I'll put my professional sort of opinion about this. There is no way that we cannot achieve that we have complete control over that. We're not playing in the market. We own the property. We can decide what gets built on. Next slide. So there was questions about what those income levels look about housing affordability. This was taken from the New Mexico HMFA. They use HUD guidelines to determine housing area median income. And they do it, so it's not a national thing. They actually do it by county or city. And sometimes if you're living in a big city, they'll actually even do it in smaller increments by census tracts. But here in Santa Fe, they do it by the county. But you get an idea about the size of the unit, the number of bedrooms that would be in it, the household income, their AMI, and their rents that they would be paying based on area median income. I didn't go into great detail about like what a 40% income, household income looks like. Sorry, I didn't do that. I was reaching late in the afternoon, and I wanted to make sure that you got it in your package, but I can provide that. It's actually on the HMFA website. This is taken. It's my last slide.
Let's start with Counselor Castro this time.
Sure, thank you so much. Amazing that you were able to get us these numbers. I really appreciate all the work that you were able to put into this. Again, talking to Phil and being able to give him my perspective on what he could do, at least for me, to make me feel more comfortable about some of these community investments. And knowing that he is looking at the market and understanding affordability is really important to me. So thank you for this slide. I am a little bit concerned that we could be doing more. And I did speak to him about addressing that he is a functioning business already next door, and he would be expanding that business. That being said, do you feel that, in your personal opinion, Director, that this is a good deal for the city of Santa Fe, in particular, in the length of time that we are able to, what has been described in this chamber as claw back the agreement?
In my professional opinion, I think it's an amazing deal. And I say that because it's a shame that we found ourselves in this vortex of this appraisal discussion. And I think that when an opportunity that the city has that is unlike any other is that a city can invest for the long term. And there are oftentimes developers and investors will look at short horizons, a 7-year horizon, and then they sell their investment. And a city has the opportunity to actually look at a 10, 20, 30-year horizon. And because of that, an investment like this is really not based necessarily on the immediate cash income, but it's really based on the return over the next 30, 40 years. So cities will often look at tax returns, and there's been a study that the Office of Economic Development did, and it was also sent to you this afternoon, that looked at jobs that would be created. And I think, and Jennifer's here to sort of substantiate this, but jobs created can be anywhere between 8 to 1,100 a year. Is that generally what you've been experiencing? And so that is really what we're investing in. And so, yes, I think it's an amazing deal. And again, I really encourage you to look at the impact report that Office of Economic did.
And it looks great, right? I think that our concern, at least my concern, is the practicality and how it will be implemented, right? How do we know that the folks in our community who need that affordable housing are going to have access to it? Yes, it's wonderful that we're going to have 22 additional affordable units. We want to make sure that that is prioritized for folks in our community. And my understanding is it is not feasible or maybe legal for us to require that only people in our community are hired for these productions, for example.
Oh, no, I don't. No, I mean, there will be priorities set. I don't. So my experience is it's the way that housing. I'll start with housing units versus the jobs. So my experience has been that housing has to go through an affirmative marketing process. So it has to be marketed broadly and open to the public. But what oftentimes happens is that, if you're investing in affordable housing in a neighborhood, you want to make sure that the people in the neighborhood have access to it. So oftentimes developers will work with community organizations in that neighborhood to make sure that those people get their application in, as quickly as possible and in multitudes, so that there's a higher opportunity for them to do that. And I have actually seen cities prioritize neighborhoods as well. But we'd have to work with the city attorney's office to see how legal that is.
And so my understanding is in this current version of the contract, there is no requirement for local folks to have priority.
In the DDA, there is not. In the community development plan, but you know what? Let me look at the community development plan.
Sorry, I think we're hearing
Yeah.
T.
Does Phil want to speak? Is that what's happening?
Oh, Phil.
Apologies. May I?
Sure.
Counselor, may I speak?
Yes.
Thank you so much. The affordable units in this project will be allocated pursuant to the city's affordability guidelines, both in terms of advertising and in terms of availability. They will only go to the general public. They will not go, there'll be no favorability for anybody in the film business. And this building generally will be all market rate. And the only allocation in it for film industry will be market rate units, a small number of units, which I think we explained in the last session would be furnished, so that when the productions came in, we would have some availability for people who work on these productions. But the vast majority of the rest of the building and 100% of the affordable units will be strictly allocated to the general public pursuant to the city's affordability guidelines.
Sorry, and in regards to jobs.
And jobs will be, we have an obligation, a very strict obligation in the DDA to give all job availability, both on our project and for all of our subcontractors and people who do any work for us locally. And it's really it's an advertising requirement that has to go through a number of community groups and be advertised locally, and we're obligated to make those hires locally.
And then stated in the DDA as well.
So the job requirement is in the DDA, but the housing requirement is not.
The housing requirement is in the DDA. It's what the DDA says is that it's as per the city's statute for its affordability. So that is strictly governed in the DDA. So the DDA basically states that we're obligated to do inclusionary pursuant to the city's standards, that we cannot pay fee in lieu. It must be inclusionary on site, and that all of those standards will be pursuant to the ordinance that sets forth how those units are charged and allocated in the city's home, quote unquote, home affordability requirements.
Understood. Thank you so much. So though it is not technically in the DDA, it is in our statute, and that DDA is tied to our statute.
The DDA references the statute.
I have a few more questions, but I will cede to my colleagues and I will come back around.
Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Hernandez, for going over some of the information requested from the last meeting. I do have some concerns, as I mentioned previously, that the triple bottom line transaction information has changed since the information that was presented to us 2 weeks ago at our last meeting. As I mentioned, it's the community value is increased by roughly $5 million, and so that's or $3 million. That to me, it just raises red flags, because it should have been there in the first place if it was actually community value. One request that was not met, unfortunately, was really covering that third appraisal, which was done. And for the public that is not aware, there was a third review appraisal that was conducted on this property, given that there was the two different values, whether it was the city's appraisal or the proposed developer's value, which led to a review appraisal. It's not a thorough through and through review appraisal, but it is a quality control and provides checks and balances. And that third appraisal valued the property at $16.6 million. And there was no reference of that in tonight's presentation, which is again concerning to me because again, I feel like if this triple bottom line check was only raised because of the review appraisal value, and it still does not meet that 16.6 million value. When we start getting into this updated triple bottom line community benefit, I mean, it's, to me, I find it quite concerning that we're putting a value of $1 million of community benefit for a cafe / restaurant. That I don't see that as $1 million value to the residents of Santa Fe. I just don't. A lot of the infrastructure, the environment, it's required. I mean, I understand the developers got to take on these costs, but especially when we look at the EV charging stations, that's going to be required for every developer here in a couple months. So if this doesn't get approved, the permits for any of this development doesn't get approved before Chapter 14 rewrite gets approved, that's an automatic requirement. So there are things in here, again, solar energy installation, I applaud them for that, but that's a cost and a decision of the developer. And so a lot of these costs, I feel we're really grasping at straws to try to make up that difference in, the monetary value of what the city is going to receive based off of any of the appraisals. And when we look at long-term benefit, because that was spoken around long-term benefit in regards to this opportunity before us, we're looking at this from a best case, best win scenario. And we've got to look at history. This isn't the first time that there was a major film studio recommended to be on Midtown campus. Santa Fe Studios was another project, mid-2010s. For folks that aren't aware of it, there was a lot of controversy around that project. That was an undergoing between a private developer and the county of Santa Fe, not the city. And so when we look long-term, I definitely understand there is an opportunity, but there's no guarantees. And I think and what I mean by that is we saw the disruption that happened with the film and movie production during the pandemic. Obviously, that impacted everything, but it really shifted everything towards a different process. And so, is this really going to become the go-to spot as it's being touted to us when you've got major movie studio production 60 miles down the road in Albuquerque? And I think I'd like to really take a deeper dive into regards to their capacity. And maybe that's where, if staff can provide us, are they yearning for space? Are we just hoping we're going to pull and attract folks? Because again, I want to ensure that a project such as this is successful, but we also have to ensure that we're looking out for the best interests of the residents of Santa Fe. And that is the lens I'm looking at this through, because this, at the end of the day, is city property. It's residents of Santa Fe property. It's their property. It's not just one person's. It's not just the city government's to say. I truly look at the residents of Santa Fe to say, what should we do? And I appreciate the housing that's being proposed. But I think given the difference of appraisals, given the way that some of this community benefit has just shifted within the last 2 weeks, and there's proposed benefits that I now extremely have concern about that have been identified. I truly believe that it's in the best interests of the residents of Santa Fe to enter into renegotiations for this project. And not to say I would not be supportive of it, but I really think that us as a governing body really need to have a discussion on this, because
Counselor Garcia, can we give staff an opportunity to answer? Like, you had some big questions there that I'm curious about the answers on.
sure.
That like
Yeah, but
difference in the appraisals, like we move through your major questions. and-
right, yeah, happy to do so. Happy to do so. But ultimately, what I would like for the governing body to do is have an executive session on this topic. Because the last time we had an executive session on this topic, we didn't have a lot of this critical information that's before us now. And I think it warrants that discussion for the governing body to really dive into the details. And as Councillor Faulkner said last meeting, it's not really appropriate for us to negotiate back and forth up here. And I think that's where governing body should have that opportunity to enter into those discussions in some sense. So happy to have any of these questions be addressed.
Sure. So there was maybe three big prominent questions, I think, and Jen is here from the film office who could probably speak more to the demand on facilities in New Mexico in general and the capacity here in Santa Fe. Phil also has his hands up to respond to a lot of the redevelopment questions on costs and them being made public and their purpose, as well as I'm sure on the capacity and demand on the film production studios. I want to start by saying, though, that this DDA does represent the voices not heard. You know, when we did the community development plan, they more wanted to talk about the social aspects of what actually happened there. Jobs, access to jobs. How do we know about jobs? Will there be internships? Will there be career paths? So once I realized that that was a big issue, you know, beginning with this quality of life, I felt as though that it was my responsibility to go back into the DDA. And as you see, I have articulated every article that is in the DDA that deals exactly what those voices said that they wanted us to address in any disposition. So it got more detailed because you asked me to be more detailed. I took a much bigger picture of it at the very beginning, but once I realized maybe I needed to go into the details, and thank you for asking me to do that, that's where that came from. I'll turn it over to Jen about demand for protection.
One question though, Madam Chair, just because you did add some of these details, and I appreciate that. But the $1 million valuation on bringing a cafe to Midtown as a community benefit, how can I go back to my constituents and say, we are going to say this restaurant is worth $1 million to the residents of Santa Fe?
The cost of building it out is it, but I will let Phil do it, but I'll start by saying from my perspective in the negotiations, it was about, he had a choice about whether it would be a commissary that it was just for the cruise versus an actual place that created a destination for the public in Santa Fe so that there was actual space, a place where public would go, interact with the film studios and production. I consider that a huge public space benefit that cities love trying to figure out how to bring. So I thought of it that way.
Okay, so I'm going to rein this back a little bit. We addressed the third appraisal first. That was Councilor Garcia's first question.
Thank you.
And could you go into a little bit of detail about what's the difference between that appraisal and the other two appraisals?
Sure. I'm actually, there's a draft memo and I'm hopefully we'll be able to circulate it tomorrow that goes into a little bit more detail because as the questions arise, I realize that I need to get more and more detailed into what I'm saying. But so there are a series of things that actually each There are two appraisals. That third appraisal was a review of the two appraisals, and then they created their own opinion. It was not based on the standard appraisal methodology, which again is typically the comparables, the income strategy, and those are really the two strongest ones that people look at. Neither of which they applied, but they looked at and then sort of made some assumptions when they came to the 16.6. That's mainly why it's not used as one of the two appraisals, because it's not an appraisal. The big differences, and as anyone can logically see, a certified appraiser coming in at 14.8, another one coming in 11.4, and then another one saying, yeah, 16.6. Clearly, appraisers and appraisals are not the end fact. And just by the fact that there are three numbers out there circulating demonstrates that city chose the 11.8 as a starting point and negotiated these other benefits into it. First off, I'll say that none of the appraisals considered the community benefits and the cost of those benefits. So that is probably the biggest reason why there's so much differential among them. No appraisers consider that because it's up to the entities that are negotiating to determine what those are and determine the level of expenses that those would incur as part of the negotiation process. So none of the appraisals consider that, and those are substantial. Another one was the appraisal review did not consider the excess land. They only looked at what would the proposal was going to build out. So they never considered that. And so their pricing was higher for what they considered the excess land to be. The first two appraisals, the one that are legitimate appraisals, did include Wilson's estimate of $7.2 million in fees to bring the building up to what I would probably call, like I said earlier, commercial use. Right now, there's a lot of deferred maintenance in them, and about 7.2 was calculated by Wilson, and those two appraisals use that. The other thing that the three appraisals, or the two appraisals plus the last one review, they considered different types of markets. So ours considered a fairly medium strength marketplace. So again, this was all as though we were putting this thing out. Someone was going to come and knock on our door and say, I'll buy this thing tomorrow. So they were thinking that they considered a fairly strong market. So their property values really focused a lot on the comps in a strong market. And so that's why one reason why our proposal was much higher. The developer's appraisal looked at it as coming from a weaker market. And so I would say that it's probably closer or somewhere between there because, again, you're looking at a site that does not have infrastructure. It does not have a context of development that surrounds it outside of Cerrillos and St. Mike's. So they thought of it as a weaker market site. The appraisal review looked at it probably again from a stronger, not probably, they did look at it from a stronger moderate market. So they had a higher approach as well. They only included $1 million in their redevelopment costs. And again, Wilson's was about 7.2. So those are some big picture items that are different. And again, I will be circulating the sort of a summary of the differences between the three appraisals to the governing body in a memo in the next 2 days.
Any questions from the committee?
I do have a quick question. We heard in another presentation that a local community organization is also going to have an industrial kitchen on this Midtown campus. I don't imagine those will be in competition in any way.
Yeah, I don't think so. And Phil could probably speak to that, but no, actually, there was a huge, we want to see a lot of food places in Midtown. And we're hoping there will be competition some way, but
Can we keep the questions to the question he's answering at the moment, and then we can move on to?
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I'm just looking at all these community benefits and looking, but thank you, and I appreciate you distributing those to us, even though I think they are in our packet, I imagine.
Counselor Garcia, any questions related to the appraisals?
No, Madam Chair, I look forward to receiving the memo.
Sure.
You know, again, my concern is the lack of transparency around this process. There is a reason why we conducted the review appraisal. And I'm of the opinion, if the review appraisal had that outlier effect, then the city owes it to the residents to really conduct a third then formal appraisal. If a review appraisal was not good enough for staff, then a third formal appraisal needs to be conducted because, again, Director Hernandez, we have to look at this from the perspective that this is city property that once it is sold, the city is never going to buy it back. And we are in a position where city owes it to residents to ensure that we are doing our due diligence. We are representing them with best interest and ensuring that not only are the decisions we make going to ultimately benefit them short term, but also long term. And when I look at this from the perspective of not only from the community benefit, but I also look at it from the perspective of, you know, and I hate to put it this way, but the monetary value that's brought to the city of Santa Fe. And the reason why I say that is per prior ordinances that were approved, half of the money from the sale of this property is to be reinvested in affordable housing in the Midtown District. And so I look at it from the lens of we have an opportunity to not only increase the community benefit on the kind of front end from the monetary value of the sale of the property, but also from the somewhat more intangible community benefit lens. And I, in my position, owe it to residents to make sure we are getting the best value for that property. Because I do not believe that that property is a weak market. I guarantee if we were to put that up for sale, there would be folks chomping at it in the sense, you laugh, Mr. Hernandez, but there have been opportunities to sell it and people have fought against it. So I think we can't look at this property from the vision and the current status, because it is ultimately the city of Santa Fe who's responsible for not maintaining it for the last 6 years. And we can't say, well, because it's going to cost us X amount of millions of dollars for somebody to come in and do this, then they charge us community benefit for the maintenance that the city never did. It's a very unfortunate situation that I think it's not negotiating in the best interests of the residents. And you know, my concern is that this is going to happen with every parcel that's sold, is that, oh, it's in shambles. We just got to get we just got to get it off our books. It's in shambles. It's costing us X, Y, and Z. We just need to get it off our books.
Mr. Garcia, quickly, because you're so concerned about community and what the community is going to get out of it, can we have him address that major concern and make sure that,
Well, I mean,
because I hear your concerns, and I agree with several of them, but do you think for the sake of time, it would be good to approach this a section at a time and then get through it?
Well, and as I mentioned, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we ultimately need to have an executive session first, because a lot of the discussion I want to have usually is held in executive session, which we didn't have in the first place. I mean, when a proposal like this historically comes before the governing body, we have an executive session. That way we can have tons of conversation and get that done before it goes through this process. We haven't had that opportunity. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of this kind of, at least frustration on my behalf, because there's a lot of questions that I would like to ask that are more appropriate for executive session. And so I guess why didn't we have an executive session before this proposal was brought to us?
Staff?
I don't make those decisions.
You're the director. I mean, it's been brought
don't-
to us by,
I don't call it an executive session. I think that's incumbent upon the counselors. I don't call it, I've never called it an executive session.
there's been plenty of items that have been brought up in executive session that not a single governing body member has brought up. And all of the instances previously around Midtown, for previous disposition was brought forward by staff, by Director Brown.
Just, Counselor Garcia, I do think the administration calls executive sessions unless the council asks for one with a given number of counselors wanting. I do not think that is something that Director.
City attorney can call them, I believe, but yeah, that's what I've always been told, that the city attorney can call it. Sometimes I've made a recommendation to have them, but I usually rely on the, leadership of me to tell me you're going into an executive session.
Gotcha. Well, at this point, a lot of my questions revolve around executive session conversation. So I definitely appreciate all the work going into this, Director Hernandez, but I think it's just led to more and more questions. And so with that, no further comments from me this evening. I'll formally request that we go into executive session on this topic.
Thank you, Counselor Garcia. Again, I would like to echo some of the concerns that my colleagues have. I struggle with the same issues in that who's putting the fine point on what community benefit looks like. And so as a lobbyist, I've represented clients and you can give a number to anything. And so that's one of the concerns that I have, is that who's determining what the value of the community benefit is troublesome for me as well. I know you can say something will benefit the community $1 million or $10 million. It just depends on how you sell the value of that item. And so I do have similar concerns around this issue, but I do think it's a really good project. I think if we can get it in a place where the public trusts the city to make this decision, I think that would be very helpful. But I do have to tell you, we get a considerable amount of communications from our community wondering why we're not making Midtown all affordable housing, or wondering why we're not using that property for other uses. I personally see the long-term value of having something like this, this project at the property. But I do agree with my colleagues that it's hard to tell your constituents that a cafe is worth $1 million to the community. I mean, I can assume that there's something around gross receipts tax. There's some kind of tax that you guys are applying. How did you come up with that value?
Phil, do you want to chime in there?
It's the cost of construction. And essentially we had a negotiation with the city. We're required to open a public cafe. It's in the article of the DDA. The reason that they want a public cafe is that there's currently no food and beverage outlets inside of Midtown. And the people who work there, both city staff, and the people who are at the transitional housing shelter, and also the people who are at SFAI, and also the productions, have to go off-site to eat. And all of the people who live in the neighborhood to the south don't really have any, daily dining or cafe options. So there was an interest in spurring the urban and development on the campus in having a public cafe. because there's never been a cafe in any of these buildings before, we have to develop a first generation restaurant, which is extremely expensive. It involves building an entire kitchen, bringing in utilities. We're not permitted to do gas on the campus. So, probably everybody on this call right now uses gas heat and gas cooking. We don't have that luxury on the campus. We have to do everything electric, which means very expensive electric service, expensive HVAC. It's very, very, very complicated, the restrictions that have been put on in Midtown. And a lot of these restrictions are really wonderful, positive things, but there's a hefty price tag for them. And so the $1 million is the cost of providing that. And I can give you an itemized budget for how much it costs. It wouldn't be something that we would normally do because we wouldn't really get enough public benefit or revenue from it from the productions. We would probably do more of a commissary that just serviced them when they came into town. So that's where the number comes from.
So I hope you can follow me a little bit on this.
Sure.
It's hard to say to the tax-paying citizens of Santa Fe that they're benefiting because you're having to do something that you would have to do regardless. So it's like saying McDonald's should get a deal if it buys property from the city of Santa Fe because it's building a restaurant. Like that's a hard sell.
Yeah, I get it. I think you can remove it. Tell the MRA, tell the city staff you don't agree with it and they should remove it from the analysis.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment? Yes, I just find it, again, frustrating and concerning that comments were made that there's no restaurants in the immediate vicinity of Midtown. I mean, I ate at one this morning. Yes, that doesn't count. So it's my comments.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. I do think that we need to take a kind of different look at what we're calling community benefit. Because I personally don't think a restaurant I don't think a restaurant being built by the person who's going to own the restaurant should be considered a community benefit. To me, it's an intangible benefit, right? So you have tangibles and intangibles, and this is intangible. Who knows how many people in that are going to use that facility? We don't know. And so I'm not opposed to it. This is one of the things we're struggling with is we're being asked to believe in tangibles and not being given a ton of evidence that those intangibles are worth the value that we're being told they are. And so I think that's moving forward. That's going to be something that this project's going to have to contend with. And I understand your pain as a project. I represent projects like this often. It is painful to go through the government process, but it is nonetheless something that has to be addressed. I think moving forward on this project is we need to see some kind of research, some kind of something that tells us that that restaurant is worth $1 million in benefit to the community. Other than we're just saying, oh, well, we're building a restaurant, and so we're going to deduct that. We're going to say that's community benefit. We don't know. We don't know if it is 100% going to be community benefit. And if it is, we don't know if the people from Consuela's Place and the transitional housing and some of the people from the area are really going to go and eat there and genuinely benefit enough that it's worth $1 million as a deduction for the cost of the project. And again, I'm not opposed to this project. I think it's a good idea, but I do have concerns about how we're calculating community benefit and the fact that there isn't a lot of evidence-based or data-driven, right? Like that's going to be, I would caution you moving forward. Sure. If you say something's worth $1 million, show us data that says that that's worth $1 million. And data that is relevant to Santa Fe.
Of course. Yeah.
That's all I have.
If I may respond, there's two things that I think that I had to consider in identifying. Community benefits is a elusive term in many ways, but what I was attempting to quantify is what we negotiated in the deal. So an alternative, which was a real alternative, was that we would have gotten a studio, Acme Studio production, and they would have wanted to build a wall the way we see in Culver City, Studio City, the type of facility, production facility that is exclusive from, a neighborhood, a community, and engaging that community in those jobs and everything else. So we wanted to break down those barriers. And so that was what the alternative was when I created, this is the project we're getting because we're dictating what we want to see there. We're not just letting it up to the market to determine what they think is best. We were told by many voices in the community what they wanted to see. So this is attempted to quantify those things and represent that. So community benefit, it's not an internship, someone in Hopewell, man, that's a very different kind of community benefit. And I totally understand that. That was the juxtaposition of a project like this that we spent, over a year negotiating. The other thing I think that's come up too is though, we have these appraisals as though that there's someone knocking our door saying that there's an $11.4 million project and I'm willing to pay that amount to you tomorrow, or the 16.6. And there's no one knocking at our door. And it would be wrong to inform the public that we did actually look at marketing this parcel for many months before the RFP was actually issued. I worked closely with the State Film Office and when Secretary Keys was still in that office, because she was going back and forth to Los Angeles as well as to Atlanta. And so we gave her a package of information about this parcel. The community wants to see film industry, and they also want to see jobs, internships, program, and education at the site. And so all of that was written into these packages that she took. There was no one biting. So there wasn't someone knocking and even saying, well, you know what, if you get rid of that film use, I have some housing, that would be a different appraisal perspective and a different kind of market. So it wasn't as though that it was sitting there not being looked at, or we weren't trying to actually dispose of it outside of an RFP process. We wanted to see what the market was actually interested in. We weren't getting any bites. So I know this is an old adage, but a piece of property is only worth something someone is willing to pay. And we started with, all right, I understand that perspective. We have an $11.4 million appraisal here. So we're going to figure out what we can get out of this, because if you're only saying that you're only willing to pay $5 million, we need a lot more than just a film production studio out of this. So those were the juxtapositions that we were, negotiating over.
And I appreciate it. And I think you guys have done a good job of this great idea. But to the layperson or to someone who's not super familiar with the project, it appears like we have a number that we wanted to hit. So we just started banking in some ideas about what community benefit would be and how much that would cost. Like we need to hit this number. So let's say the restaurant's worth we need $1 million, the restaurant's worth $1 million. And we need this is worth this. And we need this, and this is worth this. I haven't seen anything that tells me, and the restaurant is probably the most blatant example, that says, okay, we're saying it's worth $1 million because in this market, the number of people who would use it and the amount of money that would bring into the community and then be spent in Santa Fe, like all the formulas you use to set values on indirect and direct economic development. In my mind, that's the only place where you could find anything that would make sense about how it benefits the community. And so again, I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious happening. I'm just saying that I think the council, at least the members of this committee this evening, would like to see what did you use to come up with that number, and it can't be the cost of construction, because the cost of construction is what would be the cost of construction for anyone who want to do business on the campus for this particular thing. And so I don't think we can say like a developer coming in and building a building is then a benefit to the community unless we see some numbers that show how the community is going to benefit from that other than eating there. And that restaurant will have the profit from people eating there. So it's a hard sell is all I'm saying. But I do want to address one more thing. I worked on one of the projects that bid for the Midtown campus. I don't know, when was it, back in 2019? The infrastructure on that campus is horrible. It is not an exaggeration when you guys speak to the infrastructure and the cost of putting buildings there and changing to gas, and it is awful. And so I think the council should at least consider a little bit that this developer's walking into something that's like above the pale on, or beyond the pale on what is difficult where infrastructure is concerned. And I know when you sell a house, if you don't have a good roof and you don't have good stucco, then the price of the house drops. And so on that front, I can see where the value would drop. Anything else from any of the community members?
I would like to make a motion that we can no longer hold this in this committee, that we move this forward without a recommendation.
Second,
I'll second.
call the roll, please.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Yes. Brings us, we're out of consent calendar. We don't have any action items. We don't have executive session matters from staff.
I've got a few updates. Well, let's see. A few updates from the Community Health and Safety Department, just regarding events that are going to be happening at a variety of our facilities. So the recreation centers will on December 19th be hosting Posada Latina in collaboration with Councilors Garcia, Castro, well, both Garcias, Councilor Michael Garcia and Councilor Lee Garcia, Castro, Faulkner, Chavez, and Mayor Weber, as along with local businesses. We'll be having Hanukkah on Ice on December 26th from 2 to 4 at the GCCC. There are lifeguard certification courses during winter break, December 26th through the 31st, and the minimum age for certification is 15. So please help spread the word. Santa Fe Skating Club winter shows, December 7th, 2024. Teen Night, December 28th, 2024 at the GCCC is a winter wonderland theme. I'm gonna just go ahead and send these to everybody in an email. But yeah, lots going on. And I can send that in an email.
Yes, that would be. Else from staff?
Sure, I'll give an update from the Community Development Department. Joanna Nelson, Director of Office of Economic Development, filling in for Office of Affordable Housing. I sent you all an email that has some of the updates from our office. I'm hopeful the next meeting will include housing as well as some of our other divisions. I do want to mention this week has been really busy so far. We started off Sunday hosting and sponsoring an event with Chainbreakers, which was a great community neighborhood event where we hosted numerous resources focused on housing and eviction prevention, had a great mariachi group. It was a really lively time and a really great pilot to work more with Chainbreakers in Hopewell Man areas to get resources out into the community. As well, on Tuesday, We had a small business finance fair, which was really successful. That was our second one that we've hosted so far. We had about 100 folks register, show up, and over a dozen small business lenders, credit unions, grantors. This is our opportunity to really get resources, specifically financing to our community to start or grow their business. And then today we hosted Coffee and Collab, had a really successful event where we are trying to organize and support our economic development ecosystem. And I put some flyers on your spaces, and that is making sure you're aware that the outdoor recreation industry meetup is on the 12th. I think I'm getting that right. That's at GCCC. This is our third or fourth time convening our folks in outdoor recreation. Great opportunity to meet the workforce folks, small businesses, and the partners that are really involved with growing that industry. And I'm gonna hope that you read that email. Please let me know if you've got any questions about the other divisions and activities going on. I'm hopeful we all can get some rest too after these next couple of weeks. So wishing happy holidays to all.
Thing from committee members.
So yeah, just plugging again, Posada on the south side, that's going to happen. Also before that, December 11th to 12th is Guadalupe Day, and there is an installation going up at Earth Care. So we're going to try to have some festivities around that. Yeah, and thank you all for the amazing work. This is one of my favorite committees, so I'm just glad to share with you.
Mr. Garcia?
No updates for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I also have to make a couple of plugs. Of course, La Posada, we're super excited about it. It's the first annual event that we're doing on the south side. We hope to continue doing it every year. I want to shout out to Fire and to the city for everything they're doing. I also want to make a plug for the Northern New Mexico Toy Drive. There is a ton of need, and I think given the economy, it's harder to find families who can help other families right now on this level. So I'm just pushing for everyone to make contributions. We're working a lot with the local businesses. They have been incredible. I will have more thank yous on that as soon as we get all the contributions in. But I'd also like to thank staff tonight for helping me chair for the first time in my entire life. Thank you guys very much. And thank you, Director Hammond Paul, for bringing water for everybody. All right, and if that's it, we're adjourned.